today is 18th of April 2025, a little bit more than 2 weeks since the so-called Liberation Day, and President Xi of People's Republic of China just came to Malaysia on an official 3-day trip as part of his Asian tour. In the meantime, the tariff war had heated up significantly between USA and China, both hitting each other with triple-digit tariff, but also somewhat cooled down when Trump announced a delay in the implementation of the reciprocal tariff with everyone except China. Now, the capital market somewhat stabilized, but there remains a lot of uncertainty. The scene is really set now for a narrowing of the tariff war between USA and China, both being the number 1 and number 2 economy of the world. Everyone will still be impacted one way or another. So welcome to another episode of Simon Says, and Lyra joining us as usual.
Hello.
Now, we're sort of doing that monologue for a while, right? I mean, just kind of recap, because, this episode, even the last episode, kind of is getting a bit technical and things like that. But I really do enjoy doing these episodes because when I look around, I don't find a lot of sensible, common sense commentary on the whole issue. But of course, more than anything else, we are looking at, what is it for Malaysia and what people should be aware, because we need to understand both sides of the story, right? So maybe before we start, we just quickly recap. Now, of course, you can go back and listen to our recordings just 1 week ago. But right after our recording, so many things have changed, right? Including the mutual declaration of tariff and the suspension or the reciprocal. So we kind of talk about, from Trump's perspective, what is his angle? And remember, we referenced Critical Spectator article, which really, I think, sum up very, very well, not the things you can hear from mainstream media. Then, of course, the other thing which we also talk in length is how the US Trade Office report kind of exposed our country. It's like the whole NEP policy is being made public. I mean, people, if you do a bit of research, you can find it, even in Wikipedia and things like that. But for it to be in the official trade document, it doesn't look very good. And I think that's one of the reasons why many nations are a bit pissed. Because, hey, the dirty laundries are being displayed. And of course, we both felt there is an opportunity because the protectionism, we just did the episode on DEI, affirmative action, all these kind of things. There is an opportunity when our PMX, supposedly a reformer. Now, of course, we understand his predicament, in the Madani, in the unity government, but we're still not seeing enough reform. I mean, that's what we've been saying in this show. Then, of course, now one of the things we didn't talk about, and I don't know if you want to chip in, right, is really one of the original criticism of tariff, which kind of now just dissipated, is inflation. So what do you say to people when they say, it's going to cause things to be very expensive?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, if you look at what happened back in 2020, there was also a tariff. Obviously, for those who are investing in the stock market, they would know that, hey, actually there is like a pattern to this whole thing. So we are talking about pattern here. So when you look at it, actually there was tariff that was already been imposed on China, especially. And you see the impact on the prices of the material. Actually, the consumer probably just got hit with maybe something like 1% to 2%. So it's not like a price hike per se. So, but there are so many other factors like unemployment. You have obviously the influx of illegal migrants. All these things are actually causing your economic standing to be worsened. And you also obviously you have like unlimited printing of money. When you keep printing money, the value of the dollar is gonna depreciate, and so that's just like a fact of life. And when people don't see all these things, and people just kept tying it all to supply and demand. Yes, but supply and demand is important, but that's not all the theory it is to how things are gonna be. Even Jerome Powell was just saying that, hey, even with this sort of thing, it's gonna be like just transitionary.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting word he used, transitionary. That means, while people are trying to adjust supply chain, maybe it become more expensive. Suddenly I cannot get the part I want. Suddenly I cannot get the chili from India, for example, and things like that. So, he even came out and say, openly, but all the mainstream media continue to want to push that narrative. Then, of course, the point about money printing is really the key, right? I mean, once we understand how money printing process is, that is the single biggest factor in terms of inflation. Now, of course, not saying that supply and demand has nothing to do with it. Then, of course, the last point we can mention is really historically, people always look at the 1930 Great Depression, and that was a time when America introduced one of their greatest tariff, but it didn't cause inflation. In fact, it caused deflation of the economy.
Yep.
People, it's like just, then depression. So they just don't even have the capacity. It's not like things are becoming more expensive. They don't even have the capacity. So most economists today, they will say, tariff has nothing to do. It's not a big deal in terms of the scheme or the big picture. Then, of course, historically, America has always applied tariff. It never caused inflation, historically speaking. And now, of course, the whole macro and economic theory, we don't really want to get into that. But you don't see that argument now, right? Because I think that the latest economic data from US, yes, the market is still very wobbly and things like that. But you have the consumer price index of 40, 50 essential item, no change, and you see the jobs are very is doing very well. So and Trump's approval rate is very high.
Yes.
I mean, of course, we have said it again and again that time will show how this will play out, and this is what I want to talk about in this episode, right? There are some pain. This is not without consequences to China, to USA, but also, Malaysia, we are involved in all this kind of thing. But let's talk about the big event just took place. President Xi Jinping's second visit as head of state to, it is quite significant, right? I mean, it's like China president don't usually visit many countries, but of course, this is President Xi's third term, quite unprecedented, since the days of Deng Xiaoping. So what's the overall impressions you get? I mean, he was here for 3 days, right? And now I think he's in Cambodia.
I think what he's trying to do is trying to rally more support from Southeast Asia countries.
Was it that obvious?
I think so. I mean,
but he didn't
the
say
timing is a bit impeccable.
Yeah, I think in the speech he mentioned America like once or twice, not like very like excessively, but not the usual wolf diplomacy.
I think it's more telling when our prime minister is also kind of like subtly bashing USA. So I think, obviously the main theme would be, hey, how is it that China can work together with Southeast Asia to basically rally support against, hey, this big bully that is trying to like cram us down, and that's like not upholding the end on free trade. But I think China is like crying wolf here when it comes to free trade. I mean, they have been the biggest exploiter since they joined World Trade Organization, and people don't realize it. I mean, personally, when I read about this whole thing, I don't realize that because the way that China's economy work is that it's mostly based on export.
Yes.
So because of that, in order to make everything cheap, affordable, basically get people addicted to like cheap but poor quality stuff, sort of, you kind of have to make your costs low, and that who's gonna be that person that is basically getting the treatment, I mean, obviously the citizen themselves. So I mean, then when you have like basically just causing yuan to just drop like crazy, I mean, are you even having the national interest at heart? I mean, that's the whole thing about this whole thing. I mean, we're not talking about pro-China or even pro-America here. It's like there is a systemic oppression of middle class that basically I think Trump is just trying to, hey, let's decouple from decouple from China while we can. So I think all this thing, people are not seeing the true intent behind this whole thing. It's not like Trump is like wanting to launch a trade war. He's actually trying to end a trade war.
Yeah. Now, very interesting you move straight into the decoupling topic because I mean, we might as well get into that, right? Because see, one of the things I think a lot of misunderstanding is that, yes, in terms of GDP, China is, number 2 in the world, But of course, even, Conrad Black was the one who said, even 10 years ago, people were like saying that, or any moment now, China economy will surpass USA. But 10 years later, their economy actually is smaller than 10 years ago compared to US. So they are, now you mentioned about them, their whole model being an export driven. And that is very true. If you want to be the cheapest factory in the world, you have to make your product. How do you make your product cheap? So you have to lower down the cost, and you have to make sure your currency is down. Now, by the way, do you know that China has created a trade surplus of 1 trillion with the rest of the world? Because they are the world's factory. So that is a model. That model requires a lot of manipulation. That model requires nobody can do business in China. If you want to do business, then there must be some transference of technology. Now, I realize a lot of things we say may become offensive to a lot of people, but I do encourage people, if you really want to see about what this trade barrier is all about, do your own research and things like that. You can even find, even there's one article, I think I was trying to reference it last week. I think it's a professor of one of the university in Beijing, right? And, talking about how China should be responding. I mean, it's a very diplomatic kind of article. I think it's published in FMT. And he focused on what China needs to do in terms of boosting out its domestic spending. Because you see, people always say, well, this is free trade. That's a thing that it's like caused me to be the most annoyed when people say China's practice is free trade. It is not free trade. Because there is a systemic manipulation. So they will be like, oh, they are growing and things like that. Trump is very unreasonable. You should let it be organic. You see, if everything is organic, the labor market of China should be increasing. People should be getting much higher wages. If your country's economy is great, your currency should be going up. So that means China should become like Taiwan, Japan, or Korea. That's a very similar model, but they can't. Because the moment yuan go up, you can't be the world's number 1 exporter. The moment your labor market demands higher wages, you can't be the world's biggest exporter. So it's like, so in a way, I am very sympathetic to their system because it's not easy to change. And if you want to do that, you have to pay more. That is why now you look at the socio-economic problem and you have the Tanping movement and things like that. People don't want to work because if you don't have a good start, no matter how hard you work, you will not be able to make it. A lot of people feel like that. Then there's, of course, the aging community and things like that. So yeah, I mean, since you kind of move straight into the decoupling, and in a way, I just find it very interesting that President Xi will come and now and say, look, let's gang up together because there's a big bad bully. But the other thing, which do you recall a few weeks ago, there was a big hoo-ha in Vietnam. Chagi is launching in Vietnam, and then suddenly their app show Southeast Asia map with a 9-dash.
Yo.
And then the app even disappeared. There was such huge protest. I don't know if Chagi have launched. I need to ask Lanchi.
No, I think
they delayed the launch. I think the app was delayed, but what about the actual cafe?
I think it's not opening.
It's not opening, oh my. And it was a huge backlash. So, of course, I mean, 9-dash is just one issue, which they are basically, they have military drill, they build military facility near the Southeast Asia. They even say some part of petroleum, north of Sarawak belongs to them. All kind of provocation. But of course, Vietnam and Philippines are the most vocal, but Malaysia kind of, because, we are in this, I mean, I don't want to use the word collusion, but I think for more than 10 years already or more, China and Malaysia consider China the biggest trade partner. Biggest in the sense, in terms of export and import is the biggest. But of course, the whole economic strength and relationship is more than just import-export, right? Of course, Chinese tourism to Malaysia is a huge kind of thing. So I do understand where our government is coming from, but I just find it a bit hilarious that the real big bully is coming and say, let's gang out together.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, I mean, about his trip here, the other thing I do realize now, of course, both of us, I mean, you do read Mandarin, right? I mean, but do you consume much Chinese media?
No.
Not really. I mean, I heard from Lan Shi and you know, people like David Tian. Yeah, there's a lot of reporting, a bit of positivity there. But let's talk about non-Chinese media, you know, talk about the mainstream, News Straits Times, Malay Mail. Then you have the more online one, Malaysia Kini, FMT. Hardly any reporting. And it's like very sanitized, almost like there is an instruction to say, do not criticize the leader, the great leader from China, but let's keep everything very tame. So that's the. I mean, I kind of write in the note here, you know, to describe the whole visit. You know, what's the word right here? Disinterested, right? It's like not like people. I don't know, you know, are they expecting offer? I mean, there's a lot of MOU being signed and things like that, but nothing concrete, nothing substantial. So do you think Malaysia is like our leaders are taking a very deliberate approach not to aggravate America, especially since they're going to meet them at the end of the month? Do you feel there is that posturing there?
Yeah, I think so because I mean this would be a good time for Malaysia to really truly remain neutral. I mean to remain neutral, you kind of have to be a bit less emotional about the whole thing and actually not get caught by the whole cancel culture once again.
Yeah.
So basically, I mean, we are not saying that Malaysia should be choosing sides. It's just that economically and on national interest perspective, I mean, we are owing China a huge amount of debt. I mean, with the ECRL projects and things like that. So, I mean, is it really beneficial to us at all, you know? So with all this thing in mind, I think the leaders, the national leaders, they should really weigh their options and basically just see, hey, I mean, is there a better way of doing trades with the United States and truly maybe just lessen a bit of posture? I mean, obviously, one of the big thing that came out of this whole visit by presidency to Malaysia is that, hey, I mean, let's have ceasefire in Gaza. I mean, like of all the things, I felt like that's like truly quite restrained really. I mean, in terms of the response, I think that definitely has to do with the fact that Malaysia is sending a team to Washington to basically do a negotiation. And I mean, you don't want to blow up your chances to basically you are given an opportunity to just stand and maybe it's also in the best interest of Malaysia to decouple from China as well.
Yeah, and of course, no, I'm glad you mentioned the whole boycott, cancel culture thing because I almost forgotten about that episode. And the whole thing with Palestine and things like that, there's a lot of, you know, boycott Starbucks, McDonald's and things like that. So then, of course, after Trump won the election, you can see the rhetoric kind of lessened down because I mean, look at what Trump is doing domestically, you know, dealing with people who protest, you know, cover their face, no ID in all the Ivy League. He's cancelling visa and things like that. And people are saying, how dare you? And he's like, how dare you come to my country and create havoc? So
Exactly.
you can see that Trump is not joking when he wants to stop cancel culture. But of course, that's part of the cultural war.
No, actually, I was very surprised because this afternoon I just went to KFC with my colleagues and I was surprised. I mean, when I was just like sitting there and I saw, hey, there's a banner that says, hey, did you know that the whole KFC is actually wholly owned by Malaysian entities?
Yes.
I mean, like EPF and things like that. So I was like, okay. I mean, that goes your point and things like that. And they even have to come to the point where we are also contributing a huge amount of zakat that is beneficial to the Muslim. And you also have like various sorts of things that actually, I think at the end of the day, you're like, for lack of better words, like trying to be man pleaser. And I mean, basically, the whole boycott culture is you're trying to appease a certain culture or a certain people group and at the expense of other people groups. So we're not saying that that should be the case. I mean, so we're not saying that, hey, Malaysia should choose USA at the expense of China or vice versa. It's just at the end of the day, what's in it for us? Because I mean, all these things are actually very telling when other nation, big country is actually saying that, hey, you have a lot of trade barriers that are actually not beneficial to your own people even. And so you have all this thing, and when people are not given the luxury of like choices, I mean, then are you actually trying to control? I mean, you talk about like a free nation. So I think at the end of the day, what Trump is doing is actually demonstrating that, hey, I mean, if you want to have like freedom I mean, you have to have small government. You have to trust the people to be able to like exercise the judgment, discernment on, I mean, just basic things like, hey, buying things from whichever store that you feel like buying.
Yep.
And at the end of the day, I think it's more like returning the purchasing power to the people itself. So I think in this context here, actually, we don't really have much purchasing power for Malaysian. I mean, you have to like, when you look at different products, I mean, when one is like tariff 200%, I mean, orange juice, you have to choose. I mean, that's just like a bit bizarre. I mean, can you imagine if like Tesla is being sold with less than, I don't know, maybe 100K here?
Yeah. I mean, who
People
will
will
buy
be-
the local car?
Exactly.
So yeah, it's very interesting because you remember we are not for particular political leaning or things like that, but the whole backbone of the theme of what we're doing with this podcast. Really remember the theme we've been highlighting is really we want to encourage small government because we want less government intervention, and at the end of the day, people have the right to pursue happiness. So we are not seeing that with all the trade barrier that's happening. I mean, car is a great example. It's just like, yeah, I mean, people will be like just assume that, well, it's because Toyota or whatever is more expensive. It's not because they're more expensive. It's because the price has been artificially inflated to protect the local production. Now, in the last episode, I recall we talk about what does America really want for Malaysia. I think from an economic standpoint, not a lot.
No.
Because I think US is more interested in the immediate entity that is kind of like intermediary production to China's product. We're talking about Vietnam, Cambodia, to a lesser extent, Japan, Korea, of course, India. Then you have countries who have kind of made themselves very integrated with the Chinese economy, Australia, Canada, so Mexico. So he is really targeting this country. Malaysia is not in that category because we have very specific. In fact, our export to US and to China very, very different. So in terms of economic adjustment, I don't even think there will be a lot of demand. But of course, there's all these non-trade barrier plus other things. Like we talk about the boycott, we talk about the Palestine posture and things like that. But yeah, I mean, I still feel there is a great opportunity. And you can start to see some opinion pieces coming out already in the newspaper that, look, Malaysia can be China friendly, but we don't need to be pro-China. So I think that's fine, but the issue is, would China find this arrangement acceptable? They may not.
I think it will definitely be interesting to see how fast the US can strike a deal with Russia.
Yeah, I mean, if they end the Ukraine war, have deal with Russia, and if some of the major countries have tariff deal, it is going to apply a lot of pressure on China. But let's talk about. I mean, since we're at this topic, we kind of jumpstart early on about the decoupling, right? But maybe we should kind of go back and define what is decoupling. So I was just looking at some of the previous years' article, even when Biden was president, and even as early as you see, the whole concept of decoupling has been around, but it's kind of magnified during the COVID era, because all of a sudden in COVID era, people realized the limitation or even the danger of globalism. So imagine, only Malaysia or some countries are doing, rubber gloves and things like that, and people need that for COVID time. And Malaysia has no capacity to export to everyone, or different things, pharmaceutical products only made in China. So those time we saw a lot of restriction, and really one of the weaknesses of globalism. I mean, it's like globalism only works if everyone is willing to sell, right? But now with the tariff war, you can see even more already. I mean, some of the clear example, US is stopping. I mean, it has been doing that since Huawei, doing all the 5G and things like that. But they are stopping some of the export of higher end silicon chip, and China is banning Hollywood, and Trump is just like whatever, and rare metal. So these kind of things are happening, and to be fair, it has been ongoing for a while. So COVID, we start to see this term coming out. Conrad Black, of course, in his opinion piece to Airport Time, he used the word containment strategy. Eurozone, they use a more, I don't know, maybe something that is a bit more politically correct, de-risking. So all these things actually are all the same thing, right? I mean, in short, you want to make sure that you are not overly reliant. And it could be economic reason, it could be national security reason. I mean, just imagine you're a country, you don't have a single timber, or you don't have food. Can you imagine like Malaysia has to import a lot of rice? That's not good for us, right?
Yeah.
Where is the food security? So this is the kind of thing that we have to begin to look, why are we not doing agriculture if suddenly there's famine, nobody wants to sell to us? So these are the kind of thing that people need to look at it, right? So, but anyway, before we go into some historical background, what's your general feel about this decoupling? Because now maybe two things first. First, do you hear people talk a lot about decoupling? Because I was back in Cebu on the weekend. I was talking to my father about decoupling, and of course, talking about a little bit of history, which we're going to talk about. Going back to the Cold War and World War II. And he was very surprised because he said he never heard this kind of discussions in the mainstream media. But so have you been hearing people talk about it? But also, what's your general feel about this decoupling process?
No, actually, not many. I think a lot of people are actually triggered by the fact that, hey, I mean, how
dare you stop the globalism?
Okay, I think people are a bit like shocked with the way that the reciprocal tariff is being calculated. Then they begin to say, hey, actually that makes a bit of sense as well. Then, I mean, obviously you have the stock market reacting, to Trump when they say, hey, it's a good time to buy now. I mean, then after that, immediately thereafter, then you have like China that is like dumping stocks. So then there's a lot of like up and down. I guess people are still trying to recover from the whole emotional ride from this whole Liberation Day announcement.
But why would they be surprised? I mean, we have seen greater shaking during COVID time, right? I don't think this is greater than COVID.
I guess people are in a sort of illusion where they think it is, hey, I mean, why are you... I mean, basically, we talk about elephant in a room, but obviously there's a dragon in the room that you have to deal with. So I think people don't realize the extent of encroachment that has been happening in the United States, and actually how much they have been taken advantage of by China. I mean, you have one country that is saying that, hey, I'm still like developing country, so I deserve to be in the most favored nation list.
Correct.
So, I mean, with all this thing, then you begin to think, how long should all this thing be happening? But I think people are too emotional about the whole thing. I think even now that people are still pretty sore about the whole thing, and they're like saying, hey, maybe Trump is doing a U-turn here. So, but I beg to differ that Trump is doing a U-turn. I mean, I think it's just a matter of him trying to put the dragon to the table to negotiate.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about the 90-day delay, people talk about U-turn, but I think Critical Spectator sum it up the best. He say, if his intention was to isolate China, and the way, China could have said, well, we want to talk also. So please let us have the 90 days pause also. They could have done that very easily.
I think their pride wouldn't allow them
of course,
to do
of
that.
course. But if they did that, Trump will find lesser reasons to not give them 90 days.
Yep.
So, but of course, in their media, they say fight to the end and things like that. So I guess their attitude is bring it on. But of course, the other thing which I think is worth mentioning right at the beginning of this discussion is really, since China is on the path to become the world's factory, we're talking about 30, 40 years since, Deng Xiaoping opened up the whole place and the eventual joining of WTO. Here's a number. We're not even talking about factories. We're talking about the actual businesses, manufacturing businesses. 70,000 shut down in US. So for Trump, it's very easy. What about these people? Scott Bessent said, what about the 50% American who are in debt? So from the national interest point of view, I really cannot blame them. I mean, if Malaysia, we have more than 50% of our population in debt, we have 70,000 businesses. We lost our businesses, to Indonesia or whatever because of whatever policy. Then I think people will be angry and demand certain things to be done by the politician. So that's just talking about national security interest. But of course, going back to the actual decoupling, I think we have to understand in the first place why. I mean, when you look at the tariff, now very interesting. I saw an article. Maybe I should just mention this. In fact, there is one economist from World Trade Organization. His name is called Ralph Ossa. So he is an economist of WTO. In 2014, he actually wrote an article and say, and he is the one who highlighted that the tariff is an imbalance. And he said, what is the general rate that is good for America? And he gave a number, 60%. He said, based on all the trade imbalances and things like that in the trade barrier. So it's very interesting. This idea came from an economist from WTO now. Of course, maybe he's an outlier and things like that. But it's not a new idea that American has been ripped off. So maybe I'll just do a little bit of, now I know we don't have time to go into all the deep history part, but we have to at least understand where it comes from. And it all started at the end of World War II, right? So World War II finished, immediately you have Cold War with the Soviet Union bloc. So, of course, at that time, you had Truman and then Eisenhower. These are the people who were directly involved with World War II. So they know how dangerous it is. So to incentivize all the nations not to align with Soviet Union, America gave them great economic reward. So you're talking about Western Europe, all the, talk about Switzerland, all those countries who are also trying to rebuild. They receive a lot of benefit in terms of tariff. Then, of course, you have the Marshall Plan in Europe. You have the equivalent plan in Japan. So later, Japan, Korea, Taiwan also receive very generous tariff, compared to America. Of course, America doesn't mind that because while we're helping you, in return, our people, their domestic market is still very, very strong. So basically, the whole thing is that US used economy to beat Soviet Union. Then, of course, Nixon came and began to try to, US does not have an official relationship. I mean, they have official relationship with China, but in 1979, the year some of us are born, they officially recognized People's Republic of China over Taiwan. So, but before that, Nixon already had that interaction. And the reason is very, very simple, because Secretary of State at that time, Henry Kissinger, he is the one who came up with this theory, and I mean, you can say doctrine, right? If you want to defeat Russia, you have to separate the bear Russia from the dragon. So really, the making friends with China and things like that. But of course, that time is still Mao, and then you have their the Gang of Four. They have internal turmoil and things like that. But it wasn't until Deng Xiaoping finally decided to open up. So it's all part of the plan to isolate, to kind of separate. Now, of course, some people don't believe in this crap and things like that, but that's really Kissinger theory. So when Deng Xiaoping wants to open up, so how do you get the capital and money? So it's a US Chamber of Commerce who invested a lot. But of course, all these Chamber of Commerce, they are really the precursor to globalist movement and things like that. They wanted some benefit. So, you had the Koch brother, who is, the billionaire brothers who are now permanently banned from Trump's orbit. So they were like the leaders of Chamber of Commerce. They put in capital in China, but then what is the plan? You have to become the world's factory. So you see successive president, Deng Xiaoping, Jiang Zemin, Hu Jintao, they are all very friendly with the globalists. But the one difference with Xi Jinping is, they use, Deng Xiaoping's doctrine, lie low, beat your time, things like that. But Xi Jinping became president 12 years ago, and he changed the whole game. And Critical Spectator just wrote an article like today, and he say actually I like Xi Jinping very much because he exposed the true nature. If Deng Xiaoping was around, he probably would have waited his time.
Yeah.
By the time China strike, nobody could fight back already. But anyway, the whole thing about them is that China is just basically encouraged to become the world's factory, and they have to keep doing that. That's why every year, what is the most important economic data for them? GDP growth, because that represents the export. Now, since we talk about this, I mean, this is just a very quick introduction. And then I want to start with the next point, which is why Trump decided to do this decoupling. I'll just mention one point and then I'll pass it to you, okay?
Sure thing.
And one of the things is really, you see, when COVID happened, right, 2020, then 2021, I remember at that time, everyone is saying that, that time the China stock, because nobody expected that China will close the whole border for 2021. Even Malaysia was opening already at that time, but China still closed. So everyone was like, okay, the economy will recover in 2022. But who knows? 2022, it became worse. And then with the housing implosion, banking implosion. So today, China economy, we're talking about the domestic economy. We're talking about the domestic consumption. Because remember what we're saying about being the world's factory. You have to bring down your currency. You have to make sure your labor market doesn't pay well. So nobody can buy things. I mean, even you see, China's addiction to luxury goods and things like that, the number one buyer of Rolls Royce and number one buyer of Rolex. And no doubt there are a lot of rich people. But when you talk about on average, it's not there. The per capita income is very, very low. So that's why with this kind of constraint, they actually kind of boost out their factory. So that it so the factory is now at what some economists call over capacity. So this is Trump's the businessman said, you have so many things to sell, I'm going to make it hard for you to sell. Now, of course, people say, is that fair? I mean, this is business and things like that. So that's the first point to consider why Trump is doing the decoupling now, because he feels he is at advantage. All right, I think over to you.
Well, I think the timing of why he's doing it now is also, you see, like a lot of nations are in huge debt. I think, I mean, obviously Trump's is all for American first. I mean, that's no doubt. But I think what he doesn't realize is the sheer influence that he's going to impact on the whole world economy and basically just bringing a war to, like, basically just challenge the George Soros gang on globalism itself. I think I heard what Lance Warner was saying in his podcast. He said that actually Trump, I mean, he literally like had a conviction, especially like an encounter with the Lord since the assassination attempt, and I think the whole perspective just changed. I mean, obviously it's definitely still draining the swamp. I mean, obviously still American interest first, but in doing so, actually he is exposing and basically just isolating China. I think because I think he saw how ambitious President Xi is, especially like the dominance that he's trying to exert over the world and basically like having a world dominance. I mean, not saying that China can't rise up to become a superpower. It's just that the way that they're doing it is through, I would say, a different kind of display of strength. Like US would be like strength in the people, but with China, it would be like strength in the money. So it's like money talks louder than the people. So I think the value is completely different. And what they have demonstrated is like the Belt Road initiative.
Absolutely.
And that whole thing and how they have been basically arm wrestle certain nations into like giving out important ports. And basically you're giving away a huge chunk of your own border security to another nation. And what's stopping China from invading? Because I mean that's just like a soft power that is like, hey, I'm helping you here, but you can't pay back your debt. You have to trade something off. I mean, people would think that okay, well, it's also business, but what they are trading off is, hey, you are trading off important routes. And I think what Xi was trying to do is like basically totally like moving away from what Deng Xiaoping and Hu Jintao they were all doing, and basically just going back all the way to like Mao Mao's time, and basically,
Reincarnation of Mao. That's what they were saying, a modern
yeah.
reincarnation.
So I think he's like trying to demonstrate. I mean, because obviously now with the sanction on Russia, I mean, obviously they are like the biggest consumer of the energy from Russia and things like that. So with that, I think they are just waiting. China is like just waiting for the right time when Russia is going to be subservient to them. And I think Trump knows that time is coming sooner rather than later. So I think because of all this thing, he has to do it like now. So I think obviously he has like great team of advisors that is like advising him with all this thing. Hey, I mean, you see like they are so mobile and agile and almost like
Yeah.
decentralized. Like different teams are tackling different things. Like Scott Bessent will be like working on the bond market. I mean, obviously there are different KPI, and then you'll have like Pete Hegseth that is like going to Panama. And so, I mean, why is China like so agitated about Panama? It's because I mean it's important
Yeah,
base.
correct, absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned all these things, and that's one of the reason why it is the administration priority to end the Ukraine-Russia war, because the Ukraine-Russia war basically pushed Russia away from Europe, and so then the bear and the dragon are I mean, I don't think I don't think Russia wants to be subservient, but it's really like they have no choice at the moment because of sanction and things like that. If they were given a choice, many people had said that Putin identify himself more as a European than Asian. So obviously, right? And so that's the thing. Now, the other thing which you mentioned really interesting is the Belt and Road, and a lot of people have used the word debt trap. But you talk to the local Chinese people here, they will get offended when you use the word. Now, why it is a debt trap? Now, there are two things here. First, you mentioned one already. The infrastructure, sometimes like Panama, like Maldives, a lot of places, they allow you, they require you, even parts of Thailand, I heard, and things like that. They require you to give up the ownership and control of the port. Yes, it is still in your country, but it's almost like a special economic zone that is outside the normal law. So that's the first thing. The other thing about that trap is they will come and offer you easy money and causing you to commit to things you cannot afford. See, so many times, my father-in-law will come and he's just like, why our government doesn't want to do the high-speed rail. Every time talk about that. But then I just reply and say, can we afford it? Do we have the money? We're still serving the interest penalty of YNDB. And now you want to commit another few $100 billion. I mean, yeah, I understand that KL Singapore is the busiest route in the world, but can we afford it? It's really like, even now you still get all these banned loan predator, right? We call them, right? They'll call you and say, hey, you want 20,000, you want 30,000. And some people just have 6, 7, 8 credit card. One credit card is to pay the other credit card. So you are being enticed to buy things you cannot afford. So I actually view high-speed rail as something we cannot afford.
But actually, come to think about this whole thing, right? I mean, the whole thing about NAP is also because we are addicted to a lifestyle of like affording things that we couldn't afford. I mean, the phrase delayed gratification is not in the dictionary. So I think people don't realize that, hey, actually, you kind of have to work hard for certain kind of lifestyle, and you kind of have to just, hold back just a little bit while you are able to work your way up.
Yep.
And basically being able to go into the next lifestyle. I think all this thing requires a lot of discipline, and I think what US is trying to do is basically, hey, I mean, we want to get like quality products. I mean, not like you just like ad hoc like addicted to like just random shopping and things like that, and just basically like buying cheap stuff. I mean, yes, you can like have it replaced like every 10 times, and it's still probably cheaper than what is made in the United States, but you get like a different kind of quality. I think people forgot how it is like to live in an era where, I mean, you can have access to quality products. So I think here we have not seen that, because I mean, obviously the culture is completely different, where we don't know when to stop buying, like not overspending and things like that. I mean, because I think our politician knew that very much, and obviously the whole 1MDB scandal can just blow up because, I mean, basically people don't like people look at money. It's like, okay, there's a lot of trillion. How many zeros are there? I think people can't even begin to comprehend how huge the impact is gonna be
Yep.
on our economy.
And the same thing is happening in US, with our 36 trillion debt, they just kept on printing money and things like that. So, you get Trump, who is finally wanting to address it because even, in 2008 financial crisis, when so many at the big bank, you get CEO who are paid millions and millions in salary and stock option, you screw up. Why should the government bail you out? Just because you're some time, it's like a time legacy kind of institution. So there's this addiction to, free stuff. Then, of course, once, in fact, printing money is, having a currency that is not based on gold standard. It's a relatively modern kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
And the house of card is tumbling down.
But also actually like what Jack Posobiec was saying, because he has stayed in China for like 2 years and really just seen how
And he's
hard.
an intern for America Chamber of Commerce.
Yeah, I think it
Which
was
is mind blowing.
very interesting because he was saying that while you are seeing like what you mentioned earlier on, like 70,000 jobs were like lost in the United
Businesses,
States. Yeah. So basically you have like, but where do all these businesses being relocated to? I mean, all these things, you have modern day Shenzhen, Chongqing.
Yeah.
I mean, all these places bloom because the businesses literally it's been like transported elsewhere.
yeah.
So I think people don't realize that, hey, how bad it is. I mean, you talk about a great nation where a lot of migrants are still trying to like cross over and risk their life to get into. But what they don't realize is like there is like a huge middle portion that becomes like rust belt.
50% in debt.
Yeah, so I think people don't realize that it is a matter of national security as far as Trump's administration is concerned.
Yep, definitely. Now, of course, the other thing people always say is that, hey, it's a la la land dream for you to think that manufacturing will come back. Yes, it will take time. It will be a huge challenge. And like what we have said so far, people are addicted to cheap stuff. So the moment you say certain things are not there, I mean, if you're used to buying certain things, I mean, we say IKEA is an example, then suddenly you find that, hey, things, I think COVID time, we experienced a bit of that, that things we used to have suddenly cannot find already. But you know what? People adapt.
Yeah.
And people move on. And there's some stuff that which you may need to have, now no more, it's fine. So it will take time, but when you think about the reshoring back of manufacturing, I don't think it's everything, because we talk about low-level product, we talk about toys and some stuff like that. I don't think Trump wants those back, but he wants things especially related to national security, things related to cutting-edge technology. He wants to have that primacy. He wants to have that edge. So, of course, you talk about computer, you talk about high-tech stuff. Automobile is very important because of the swing states and things like that. So, a few things which I believe will be his non-negotiable, but other things eventually he will say, India, you can have it. Vietnam, you can have it. Cambodia, you can have it. Malaysia, you can have it. So, I think, yeah, even things like rare earth, and rare earth, I've been reading quite a bit about rare earth, Rare earth is actually not that rare. It is only the facility to process it is rare. And because it involves a lot of impact on environment. So all the Western countries that buy into green energy, ESG and things like that, they just cannot produce rare earth. But then when so many of your things rely on rare earth and China, who produce like 80 to 85%, doesn't want to sell to you, what do?
You're going to have to produce elsewhere.
Yeah, exactly. So Trump is like saying, okay, fine, there will be some pain. Maybe we have to buy, even Linus is doing that, right? Australia, there's a few other countries. That's why he wants a mineral deal with Ukraine. He wants a mineral deal in Greenland. So there will be some pain, but hey, people will find a way. So I think I saw he just executed some EO to explore, all the manufacturing places for rare earths to be opened, and maybe there will be some exemption made for environmental concern.
Yeah, and his team is like working very, very hard to have like a lot of tax cut for those that are gonna like do reshoring. So I thought it was very, very interesting indeed. Talk about like cutting down regulations, like a lot of red tapes. in your own country just to make it easy for like business entry level to be easy for like American made um organizations. I thought that was like a brilliant idea. I mean, can you imagine the same here in Malaysia that we don't have like a booming quota and things like that? I think can you imagine the amount of businesses that are gonna flourish here in Malaysia?
And here you really see the difference between globalists and small government, because you see our government, especially our business sector, is very much influenced by Singapore, very much influenced by United Kingdom. And these are the regime that continue to have more and more and more regulation. Maybe not Singapore, because Singapore really wants influx and outflow of money very easily. You know, in fact, some people call them the world number one money laundering center, right?
Yeah.
Fairly or unfairly. But United Kingdom is going into more and more regulation. So one of the things, very interestingly, I'm not sure if you are aware, in Malaysia, we started to have SSM started to require all the shareholders to declare whether you are shareholder, whether you are you are just a nominee or trustee for a beneficial owner. That means the real owner behind you. So this is very common. But now the Companies Commission of Malaysia require you to declare. Every shareholder must declare.
Interesting.
So of course they say this information will not be made. And this year in United States, they removed the beneficial ownership requirement because they say it's bad for business. So just one example that I'm very familiar with, that you are seeing deregularizations in US, but here we are just having more and more. Look at the way, just more laws, more taxation law and things like that. But yeah, this could be a very interesting topic all together. Now, the other things which I think, let's talk about one or two more things about why the decoupling is happening now. Then we want to talk about risk and advantage and disadvantage for both USA and China and how it impacts Malaysia, right? So the other thing, of course, which I just find it very funny every time I read news article, especially for Malaysia, they'll be like, okay, we need to restrict our trade with US and things like that. Okay, fine. But do people even know that USA is buying 30% of the whole production of the world? They are basically the richest and the number one buyer in the world. So that's why Bill O'Reilly kind of make a comment, right, that caused even PMS to reply. But okay, it wasn't done in good taste and things like that. But he did say one thing, which I find very funny and true. He said, well, in US, we have a term, customer is always right. So this is the one leverage people don't understand. That, yeah, you may say, well, US, you definitely want cheap stuff. Yeah, but US is looking at everyone else and say, but you also need to sell.
But I think they have one of the best customer service in the world.
They really preach. They really do what they preach, right? Customer is always right. I mean, we have some experience with Amazon and things like that, which is just mind-blowing, right? I mean, one story which I think I told you before, we were in US, we want to buy some stuff. You know, they had those 2 days delivery, right? So you just see the icon 2 days, then you just click because you know you're still going to be around. But sometimes there's a small print and say, oh, this product will only be available 2 weeks time, 3 weeks time. So once I bought an item, which is supposed to be a 2 days delivery, and then it was like only available 3 weeks later. So immediately I emailed them and said, oh, I'm leaving in 3 days time. How? And immediately, almost like within 10 minutes, they reply. They say, well, you can just tell your hotel not to accept the product and we'll deem it not delivered and you'll get refund within 24 hours.
Wow.
I was like mind blown. Ooh, like here, you want to talk to customer service, you want to complain a Lazada Shopee case, it's like going to take you forever, man. So, yeah, I mean, they do believe in that.
I mean, there's a saying in Malaysia, it's always easy in, difficult to come out. I mean, it's
always
just like
true.
talking about termination of certain services. It's like you have to call different helpline and things like that. It's not easy at all.
I mean, to their credit, you know, the last few months is just so much internet interruption in my house, but they are improving. You know, with AI and things like that, they are really improving. So this is the part. This is the part which I don't know. I don't know why people don't appreciate that. It's like, where are you going? I think the last episode we say, look, if China cannot push the product, because it's not just the 3% they export to USA. A lot of things that they shipped to Vietnam, to Australia, all those things, they are eventually going to be bought by the American. and there will be way for them to assess that, hey, this is actually originated from China. That's why one of the reason why they were so tough on Mexico is because Mexico has become a repackaging center for China product. Just do a bit of repackaging and put made in Mexico, but it's actually all from China. So that's a thing that I don't know. I don't see. I mean, both sides will have wounding, but long term, I really don't see how under the current system how China can come out on top. It's not going to be easy at all. I mean, unless everyone gang up to fight against USA, even then, I think it's still going to be quite an even fight. But you can see, I think the only nation kind of openly support China is Spain, which is having a very similar socialized, subsidized economy. But anyway, I think we kind of go all over the place. But let's kind of wrap up. And I think I kind of put there a whole list of, in terms of, because now finally we're seeing, I mean, last week we were just saying, what will happen, nobody knows. And immediately after recording, we saw the thing, right, which is like mind-blowing, right? And so we want to talk about some advantage, some risk, some of both USA and China. I have a whole list here. I mean, both sides have their pros and cons and things like that. Maybe you can just pick a few that kind of interest you, like the advantage and risk for both nations in this, because now it's becoming a direct war, really, right?
Yeah, I think obviously the risk is that China is like going out and about to rally support.
This trip to ASEAN.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like how these nations will be choosing, I think it will actually be
Is
very
it a
telling
risk?
as well.
Do you think it's a risk to China, to USA, or to the other countries?
I think it's actually more on the other countries.
How they choose?
Yeah. So I think, but people don't realize it. People always think that it's probably a bigger risk for Trump's administration because they think that he's like doing things too harshly and like rashly and without thinking much. I think it has been something that is definitely in his mind for a longest time. So I think he definitely has like assessed through different kind of risks and things like that and felt this would be the best way of approaching it rather than just like a lot of people definitely anticipate the tariff against China, but not like the whole world.
Yeah, I think the reciprocal caught a lot of people by surprise. But then the 90 days also caused a lot of people by surprise. And now he is really isolating China. So a lot of people say is luck or he really planned it. Nobody could tell. But that kind of mitigate a lot of a lot of direct retaliation because nobody really has reason to retaliate now, right? I mean,
but he's also probably very intuitive as well.
Yeah. I mean, the whole presidency and people, the mainstream media like to make him as very rash, like what you mentioned. But actually, there's a lot of planning. There's a lot of thought. But he is not. He's not adverse to intuition and make a sudden decision because that's the way he lead, I guess.
That reminds me of the recent visit by Bill Maher and Kid Rock and Dana White.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so bizarre. I mean, like, why would he be invited? Because I mean, he's like one of the biggest pro-Democrat supporter. I mean, donor even has been like then I think it was Dana White or Kid Rock that was talking to Bill Maher and say, "Hey, have you been to like White House? Blah blah blah." And he said, "No, actually not once." And they were like so surprised because you donate so much to the Democratic Party and not
they didn't
once.
invite you.
Yeah,
Obama didn't invite you.
yeah, so he invited and he said genuinely, I mean, Trump is a very nice person and he genuinely does listen to your point of view. I think that's really a value of a leader where he would just take his time and just really just genuinely like consider all grounds and hey, what do you think about this? I mean, what do you think? Then he makes certain points. He say, actually, I agree with Trump on a lot of issues, but there are also a lot of things I disagree with. But at the end of the day, it's like he is someone who doesn't just do things in a very like rash manner and actually does take time to think through. So I thought that was interesting. I think that's something that is so unheard of. And I guess that's, I mean, if you only just consume mainstream media and you don't actually just take your time to like listen through to all this other, like how other comedians are actually saying certain things. I think it will be very, very telling. So I think that to me, honestly, at the end of the day, when people are trying to diminish what Trump administration is doing, actually they are not really, really like thinking through and even like putting their rational mind to this whole thing. But I think another benefit for USA is really just lowering down the trillions of debt. That is really, I think that's the whole thing about Doge and about the whole administration. I mean, they have to work hand in hand to really just bring down the debt and to a level that is manageable, and even causing the nation to be, I mean, for a nation to be able to rise up to where it was and even beyond the glorious days, you have to basically be debt free. I mean, you cannot be like spending where you cannot afford. I think basically that's like the whole thinking that he's like trying to instill to the rest of the world. But so I think in terms of how different nation would choose, I think it's also in a way, are you choosing like the short gain, or are you choosing a short pain for a longer gain?
Yep, definitely. I mean, the whole tariff thing must be seen in light of reducing the debt, dealing with all the illegals, because a lot of deportations, and then all the waste. USAID, that's another thing that a lot of. I mean, it's not just the imbalanced trade. A lot of these countries are also benefiting from US foreign aid, which is mind-blowing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you talk about Western Europe nations, you talk about Australia, Japan. Well, why do these countries need foreign aid? Crazy, right? So also all these things are all part of the plan to kind of reduce the debt and create a better economic opportunity. Now, since we talk about that, one of the risk, I think, risk and danger for USA, of course, will be, now you already talk about the debt, but in terms of consumer products, there will be a limitation, there will be shortage. There will be some products, electronics, drone and things like that, some countries will not want to export. And then, of course, like what Joe Pollard was talking about in his article, he kind of mentioned that some of the smaller businesses, they still rely on China factory. So the 100+% tariff, which could go all the way to 200% depending on the type of product, it's going to kill them, which is it is undeniable. Some businesses will be affected. So these are the risks. And in fact, Pollard was the one who argued, why not extend the 90-day waiver to China also? I don't know. Do you think that will ever happen? I mean, when I read the article, he kind of put it at the end, but I don't know. He doesn't sound like he's very convinced himself.
I think China is not making it easy for them as well, because of the display of strength that no matter what, we must win. I think that sort of mentality might be a killer.
And that's actually a risk for China, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think because, I mean, I was listening to one like top official from CCP. I mean, he was just basically saying that, hey, we are like a 5,000 year civilization.
We're older than you.
But
true.
Look at the formation of China. I mean, it's not even, I mean, they have a history of overthrowing the emperor. So I think it's just a matter of time where, I mean, the middle class
people cannot prosper, people cannot have a livelihood that is at an acceptable level.
Correct.
History shows that there will be revolution.
Correct. But the thing is, I think the point is like, we can fight USA. So I think if you have that sort of mentality and you're not willing to both sides just come to an amicable end, it's a huge risk for, I think, especially more so now for China. I mean, now you could only like rally one country that is like trying to support you, but I mean, imagine if Russia is like, okay, hey, let's decouple as well. I mean, that would be a very different kind of story. I mean, but obviously anything can just, I mean, it could tilt either way. We don't know.
Yeah, and I was reading one political commentary and talking about three things which China did to aggravate the whole thing. Of course, one is in terms of, US wanted their cooperation when it comes to fentanyl production and export. China is kind of like just dragging their feet because they wanted to use that as a leverage. Then secondly,
do you reckon they learn the tricks from the Opium War?
Yeah, probably. They always go back to that and say, Well, to be fair, the Opium War is not even. I mean, there are many European power there, including US, but it's not just US. In fact, you could say the British, the French probably are worse. But anyway, so they don't want to do that. And then, of course, when it comes to the reciprocal tariff, if they just say, okay, we have a talk, then it would just, there's no more excuse for Trump to impose. But no, instead they say we will fight. 80%, then 1 to 24%. Then the third thing, which very interesting, is remember in Global Times, I think, which is basically CCP mouthpiece, there is this, it's almost like, like the slogan kind of thing. It's like, what did they say again? We will fight till the end, right?
Yeah.
And so I think they already posture themselves as they want to fight. So I think I'm with you here. I feel this is a risk for China, because the only way they can win is if they get other nations to come alongside them. And which another risk, which is linked to President Xi's visit, is don't forget about their how they have aggravated the whole Southeast Asia with the 9-dash line. So I don't know. I mean, that's why for ASEAN, I think is really economic benefit versus national security issue. Is it palatable for you that China is like building something near that certain island, and then suddenly they'll say, 100 miles, 200 miles, kilometer out of Sarawak, those are our land and things like that. If there's a petroleum reserve and things like that, do you think Malaysia will give up? Do you think Vietnam will give up? So,
No way.
so that's the thing. I think ASEAN is in a tough position because of that. Okay, let's talk about one or two more risks and thing, and then we'll kind of wrap up already. This is like one of our longest recording ever, right?
It is, I think so. Well, the overcapacity, I suppose, of China's factory.
Yeah.
I mean, basically, I think it is a risk for them because they have been so reliant on the whole export
Yeah, definitely.
economy, and
They actually ramp up the export because domestic consumption deteriorated due to the
Yeah.
housing and banking.
so I think even China was doing like especially aggressively over the past year for just basically trying to boost up domestic spending, and it's not working. I mean, through subsidies, through many different ways, and actually I think Malaysia could kind of like learn from it. I mean, the more subsidy you try to give, people may not necessarily really appreciate it.
Yeah, and we're just talking about I just read an article from South China Morning Post, and with the tariff and things like that, all the factories in Shenzhen is like in a very deflated mode. So all the big companies, JD, Alibaba, all those are asked to come and do campaign to help all the businesses find alternative buyer in Euro or Southeast Asia, and these people, like, I think it's reported that every one of the big company have to spend upward of 200 million renminbi in part of the campaign, basically forced by the government to do it. So, subsidy is very, very similar also. Like at the end of the day, yes, China has great productions, and even you can say there's a great technological leap. But at the end of the day, no matter how you look at it, it is still a very nationalized economy. Now, it's a separate argument whether that's better or not. But I think the whole model, free model versus less free model, is being displayed for comparison. We're not saying which is better or not. At the end of the day, I think people have to make a decision. So the tariff war kind of put the model really at the forefront for people to choose. And yeah, I think we kind of highlighted enough already, right? And so it's all, you see, at the end of the day, really, I think it's not even about China versus USA. I think it's about, how do you want to frame, what kind of value you believe in, what kind of system you want to be. Because, we always say, our value in this podcast, we want freedom. We want small government. We don't want government to intervene. I don't want to have to get a permit to buy some grapes, for example. I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but a day may come the government require AP for specific import. AP for my coffee, for example. It's like crazy, but we're getting there, right? Then, of course, I want to have the right to pursue happiness. versus the system where government knows it all, decide for you. I mean, I think it is for comparison because I've seen a lot of people say, I prefer a CCP kind of system. More power to you. But I think people should realize the full implication of this system. So many people who say they are so supportive of either system, the American system or the China system, they have not even been living in those countries. How can you even make... I mean, of course, maybe you have visited, maybe you like certain system, which is fine. I think it's okay to support a particular system, but all we want to do is you need to know all the information before you commit.
Yep.
Otherwise, it may be like what you say, right? Easy in, difficult to come out.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think we kind of covered many bases already. We'll see whether there's a third episode on tariff. Otherwise, I mean, we'll see what happens because 1 week is a long time. Otherwise, I don't know, maybe we can come back to some domestic. But since our economic delegation is going to US, maybe it will be part 3.
Yeah, maybe.
So, okay, I think that's all the time we have for today. Until next time.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye for now.